Hello and welcome. This is the channel where we talk all things Camino. I'm your host, Camino Candice, and I'm eternally Camino dreaming. Today we're going to talk about the Pilgrim Shell and the Credencial. So to start, the Pilgrim Shell. This is mine. This is the OG Pilgrim Shell that I bought in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port on my first Camino for Camino Francaise in 2023. It has come with me the whole route of the Francaise, as well as on my recent walk from Lisboa to Fatima, and it will be coming with me on my next Camino and for all future Caminos, as far as I can see, as long as it holds up. This cost me about €3, so not too bad. And I purchased it because I did not have access to my own scallop shell. For those of you who live by major bodies of water, and yes, I am in Vancouver, I am on the Pacific Ocean, and yet to get a good size that you can actually drill holes in, it wasn't realistic. So there are people who bring their own. Apparently you can drill holes by putting tape on both sides and then marking it and drilling through. I don't know how difficult that is. I don't know how many attempts it takes the average person, but if you are someone who's done that, comment below, let us know how it went. I mean, I'm sure it's pretty easy, but I don't own a drill. So anyways, it's also a nice little souvenir for me. And one day when I make it to Musha and Fistera, then I will hopefully pick up another scallop shell or two, and perhaps I will find a drill and make my own for future Caminos. Now this one, it has quite a short string, as you can see, and that's because I've shortened it. Originally it was quite long. It was probably about like a foot long, 12 inches. And because it was like swinging back and forth on my backpack, it ended up fraying. So I just kind of doubled it up, the string here, and then shortened it. So this worked out better for me, but you do you, boo, whatever. Okay. But yeah, it's kind of a nice little souvenir to have. And this is how other pilgrims recognize you, as opposed to like just a regular backpacker or, someone just walking along the Camino, because locals do walk the trail because that's essentially their backyard. So yeah, so this is how you identify other pilgrims when you're not at a pilgrim only albergue. Now, in terms of history of the Camino Shell, because it is the symbol of the pilgrim, I have heard, and I do not know if this is 100% accurate, and yet I suspect there is quite a bit of truth in it. I have heard that pilgrims also carried shells with them because it also was how they received food, because back in the day, pilgrims relied on the kindness of strangers to house and feed them, that their meals would be served on here. Now, as you can see, this is about the size of the palm of my hand, so it's not a lot of food. And yet, at the end of the day, when you've walked the distance that you needed to walk, you're gonna be pretty fucking hungry. So any amount of food, I'm sure they were grateful for. I know there were some days on Camino, at the end of the day, I felt like that was the amount of food that I was eating, and I was grateful for it, even though I was, in those cases, still hungry. And yet that is also a present day problem. Yeah. So this costs about €3 when I purchased it. Now, I have also heard that the Pilgrim Shell was used to drink wine, especially at the Fountain of Arachi. I do not know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. My apologies. If someone knows the correct pronunciation, Irache, please make a comment below. I'd be grateful. This is a wine fountain that serves wine made by the monks at that particular monastery. And it's a really cool, nice little spot. It is gated, and now it does have hours of operation because apparently a lot of, in the past, it has been drunk dry, shall we say. And there are still days where there isn't wine in the fountain. So if you do get the chance to go, I would suggest it. It's right on the Camino Francaise. You cannot miss it. And there is, for those of you who do not drink, there's also a water tap right beside it on the same wall. So either way, wine, water, both, And so this would be a nice little sip of wine. I did not use my Pilgrim Shell. I did have an empty bottle that I filled up a little bit. And as for the review on the wine, I am no sommelier, but the wine was only okay. It was fruity, which was interesting. And yet it really wasn't my cup of tea, but it was definitely an experience. And I had been super excited, even just to see it. And then to be able to, drink the wine, and like have that part of history, that was pretty magical. I mean, the wine was not terrible by any means. It's just Spain has a lot of really good wine, and you get to go through the Rioja region where, yeah, you're going to have some good ones. So, no offense to the monks who made it. It was decent, and yet I have had better. I'm also a pretty lightweight when it comes to it. So even after like 4 or 5 sips, I personally was a little tipsy. So that was not really ideal for like 8 in the morning. But that was the time that I arrived at the fountain. And that's just how the cookie crumbled that particular day. So it was a lot of fun. And yeah, if you get the chance to go, try it. If you drink out of your scallop shell, cool. Maybe you want to wash it out before and after, but yeah. As for the Credencial, these are the paper passports that give you access to the Pilgrims only albergues. They are also what you have to get the daily stamps in order to turn in once you get to Santiago de Compostela in order to get your Compostela. So this is the one that I bought in Saint Jean Pied de Port. It cost me €2. Most of them are €2. I haven't really seen them cost anything more than that. In it, you will put your name. Okay. It'll be marked if you're going by foot or by bicycle. And the day, that's the day I started, September 7th, 2023. This is the stamp when I got to Santiago de Compostela that they used to mark that, yes, I completed it by foot on this date, October 18th, 2023. Okay. So this one, as you can see, it has, a lot of space for stamps. Okay. That's the front. And in each square, you fill it with a stamp that you get at albergues for sure, churches for sure, bars. Apparently the fire stations and the police also have their own. Guardia Civil also apparently has their own. And, a lot of people, like to have their own, and you can collect as many as you want. For sure, it's at least one per day. There is some new rules that are a little unclear. It used to be 2 stamps per day for the last 100 kilometers from Sarria to Santiago. In the past, I think it happened last fall or summer, and it's still slightly unclear. Apparently, you might need 2 stamps per day regardless of where you start, especially because it also seems like the minimum 100 kilometer rule in order to receive your Compostela has changed. But don't quote me on that. Keep looking that up. If someone actually has a clear answer on that finally, please also comment below. You get all sorts of different types of stamps. So this is the back of it. You may have to purchase a second one along your route. And yet this one, for me, worked out that when I finally got to Santiago, right here, it was actually the end of my Credencial. So that worked out really well for me. And I also forgot to collect a lot of them at the beginning, other than where I was staying at night. But like I said, at the time I went, it didn't matter because we only needed 2 per day minimum for the last 100 kilometers. Now you get different types of stamps. Each place has their own style, as you can see. And there was a couple people along the route of Frances, at least, that do wax stamps, which are very cool. And you get to choose the style. And so this was the one that I got. As you can see, his Instagram is Vita in Camino. And so it's a wax stamp. I chose this Viking symbol. And what he does is he chooses the color of the wax for you based on your energy. And then he took colored markers and then colored in the designs of gold and silver there. And I really liked his vibe that he just kind of like, he told him what stamp you wanted. Okay. And then he would like assess you as to like your energy. And then he'd pick the color of the wax and that sort of thing. And then he would take your picture and post it in a collage, you know, on Instagram for the day. So if you go back to September 28th of 2023 on Vita in Camino, life on the Camino with underscore in between each word. And you scroll back to that day, you will see me. Yeah. And he was really sweet. And there's a funny story that kind of goes with this because before I left for that Camino, I had had a dream at some point leading up to it. And my mom had asked me, you know, in real life, not the dream, what do you think is going to happen on this Camino? And I was like, you know, I don't really know. I just know I am going to meet a long-haired Viking. And that seems like a really wild and weird thing to say that you know is going to happen. And when I was in Pamplona, which was around like September 10th or something like that, there was some sort of festival going on and a lot of the performers had various Viking symbols on them. And so I have a feeling there's some sort of history in there. For those of you watching who are very aware of the whole history of Camino and are like, well, Candace, how can you like not know that? Hey man, I don't sit necessarily and read all that history for various reasons. And no, not because I don't know how to read. But anyways, it was a very interesting event. A lot of the, you know, what they called the gypsies, who are very interesting people. I had the chance to talk to a few of them and they're very interesting. And so they had like all these Viking symbols painted on them. Anyways, this gentleman who I got the stamp from was obviously much further after Camino. So I got that somewhere between Calzadilla de la Cueza and Sahagún. Yeah, so somewhere in that area. I found him. He was just outside like one of the cafes. Anyways, I chose this symbol and I had noticed he himself had all these like different rings on his fingers and all these tattoos, and a lot of them were various like Viking symbols. And he's like, oh, that's such an interesting one that you chose. And I said, yeah, I told my mom I was going to meet a Viking on the Camino. And he's like, well, I am a Viking. And I was like, oh, and he was like the long-haired Viking, right? But he wasn't like perhaps your stereotypical what you think a Viking looks like, you know? He was very sweet, and yeah, the wild, long, dark brown hair he had. And I kind of wish that I had got a picture of me and him just like for my own history and to be like, yeah, so I could show you like, yeah, this is the long-haired Viking. But alas, that did not happen. Hindsight 2020, right? But yeah, if you get the chance, check him out. He had stuff like the Tree of Life. There was a pilgrim stamp. There was like stars and moons. There's quite a few to choose from. And I think it was like €2 or €3. I believe it was by donation, if I recall correctly. So yeah, so that was really cool. So that was the credencial I used on Française. This is the credencial I used to walk from Lisboa to Fatima. So I got this at the cathedral in Lisbon, which is on the back here. This is a black and white photo of it. This is a very beautiful church. If you get the chance to actually tour inside, it's about €5 to tour. Totally worth it. Once again, it was €2. Okay. And you put your name in there. I circled that I was walking. Okay. Started on January 5th, 2025. I only needed 2 pages essentially to get me from Lisbon to Fatima. oh, sorry, 2 pages in 1 square. Pardonnez-moi. And this was the stamp from when I arrived in Fatima in order to be able to stay at the Pilgrim Suites, at the sanctuary, which was really cool. Just a note for those of you going to Fatima, the Pilgrim's beds there, because they're municipal, they do not reserve. And like I said, you have to have this stamp in order to stay there. If you're staying in those particular rooms, you do not get the option of dinner or breakfast. You have to scavenge for your own. Okay. And in terms of cooking area there, I think it's like a kettle and a microwave, which you can do, but I don't know if I don't know what they have in terms of dishes. Because when I went, I ended up staying, I chose because it was the end of my Camino for that time, because it was just a very short trip. I chose to stay in the private room. So I stayed one night in a private room with a private bath, and it included dinner and it included breakfast. And then the second night I stayed in Fatima, I stayed at a hotel, which had like an amazing breakfast. And the room was beautiful, and it was like €60 altogether. And it was literally right across the street. And had a balcony that I could go out and see the church. It was amazing. So yeah, so that was the one I got in Lisbon, €2 again. And clearly I still have a lot of room to still fill up. And so whenever I go back to finish Central Portuguese Camino, I will take it with me. Now, they look different wherever you get them. And I learned this on my first Camino when I saw how many Europeans had a different one. And a lot of them had ordered them from online somewhere, I guess usually from like a local pilgrims thing. And so I looked into that here in Canada because I wasn't 100% sure when I went to Lisbon, because I was starting January 5th and I arrived in Lisbon January 3rd, with it being so close to Epiphany. Would I actually be able to get into the church? Because it was still only open certain hours, right? So as a backup, I checked online, and in Canada, there's a place called the Canadian Company of Pilgrims, and they have local chapters. So you can go onto their website, type in your city, and they'll tell you where they were. Now, they do have one chapter in Vancouver. There's quite a few across Canada, so don't worry. There is a membership fee. I believe it was $10 for the year, and you get like newsletters and updates, whatever. And then you could also buy the Credencial, which turned out to be $5 Canadian. And because we were in a national mail strike at the time, I had a very interesting experience where I got to go pick it up at one of the volunteers from this company at her house. And so that was kind of cool. And she's like, oh, a winter Camino, like that's interesting. So this is the one that I got from the Canadian Company of Pilgrims. Okay. And it's the same setup as all the other ones. Okay. There's like even, this one does not have anything on the back, but it's got a lot more stamps on the front. So in one way, that's kind of cool, because sometimes what people will do is they'll save their Credencial and then they'll frame it to show all their stamps. So that's even something to consider on the other ones that are double-sided, only stamping one-sided if you want to do that. And yeah, there's some maps on the back that give you a rough idea of Camino stuff, but they're not the ones that you're actually going to use well on Camino. This is just for reference. You want to use the apps. I didn't use it. It'll be my backup to go with this one when I go to finish the Central Portuguese Camino. I personally think the green color is like really ugly. Like, I don't understand, CCOP, why you chose the color green. Like, what part of that says Camino? I don't know. Why not like blue and yellow or something? I don't know. The green is just, I don't know. It just doesn't do it for me. And for me, it's not, it doesn't say Canadian. And no, not because it's not white and red. And yes, I can see that there is the Canadian flag in the middle. So yes, I get that. But there's just something about it that just, it doesn't vibe for me. So whatever. Regardless, you need to have one of these in order to get into the municipals where there are no bookings taken, and to be able to have a bed to stay for the night. Okay, so I kept these in a crossbody bag on me at all times in a Ziploc bag. Why a Ziploc bag? Because it's going to rain on your Camino. And I don't mean it's going to like sprinkle. I mean, there will be a minimum of 1 day on your Camino where it will have been drier for you to stay in the shower with the water running. That is how wet it can get. For those of you from North America, like me, there is rain over there like I have never seen in my life. And there's a level of waterproofing that, in my experience, doesn't exist for that. Probably you can get stuff, especially in Europe, because, you know, they're made for that. But here in Canada, anyways, it's a little more difficult. Maybe the stuff like Gore-Tex would work. That's out of my price range, so I cannot comment on that. But yes, my rain jacket, which I will get into on another video, is at 10,000 millimeters waterproofing, which is pretty high. And so are my rain pants. And they have a 8,000 rating for breathability. And those were the new ones that I got for Lisboa to Fatima. And the first day I walked, it was torrential downpour out of Lisbon for probably most of the day. Not consistently, but I did still get wet through that. And when I walked out of Pamplona in a thunderstorm, 10 out of 10 do not recommend walking in a thunderstorm, FYI. So we'll talk about that in another one as well. It was so wet that the jacket I had at the time, which definitely was not a 10,000 millimeter waterproofing, it like epically failed. And I was like, shit, what am I going to do with my phone? And I still remember I hid under a tree after the thunderstorm stopped, so it's okay. And I was like literally bent in half so that the rain was on my back. Well, I tried to shove my phone into my bra. And there was this guy from France who came along. He's like, can I stand under this tree with you? I'm like, sure, it's no dryer. He's like, then what are you doing? I'm like, I'm trying to keep my phone dry by putting it in my bra. He's like, I can't do that. I don't have a bra. So he was lamenting how wet his phone was. My phone survived, thank you. And then I learned from a lovely Australian that you can get waterproof cases for your phone. So that's going to be part of the whole gear series that we'll get into at a later point. But today was all about the Pilgrim Shell and the Credencial. So 2 essentials that you need, and I hope you found that useful. Take pictures of the shells that you have or that you've seen, and just let your imagination run wild. They're all unique, just like you. So until next time, buen camino.